Alright guys, so now we're going to jump into media queries, and I'm actually going to do this in our CSS sandbox. So I'm going to add a file here called 13 because we left off at 12, media underscore queries.html. And we're going to put our boilerplate in with Emmet, so exclamation, enter, or tab. Let's add our title. And for the body, this isn't going to be a very practical use of media queries. We're going to do that later on in all our projects. This is more to get you familiar with how they work and the syntax. So I'm going to have a few divs here. So actually we don't even need that. Let's do an ID, a div with an ID of widescreen. And inside here I'm going to put an H1, and then I'm just going to put the text widescreen. And the names of these IDs, they have nothing to do with media queries. It's just what I'm choosing to use because I want to give you an example of each screen size and how we can add separate styles for them. So let's clear this out, and this one's going to be normal, like a normal size, computer size, whatever you want to call it. This one is going to be tablet. And this one's going to be smartphone. And this one we're going to do landscape. Okay, we can do media queries for both width and height. So let's save this and let's open this up with Live Server. So that's what it's going to look like. Now we're going to put all of our CSS up in the head area just for convenience. Usually it would be in a separate CSS file. And I'm going to add some core styles for the body. So let's just add a better font family. We'll do Arial. And let's do a background of gray. I'm just going to use color names just for convenience, because what I want to happen is I want to have a different background color for each device or each of these divs here. So let's see what else. Let's align to the center. And let's do a padding top of 100 pixels. Alright, so we'll save that. It's going to look like this. Now, as far as testing your media queries and breakpoints, you can resize the browser. Okay, that'll work. It'll update in real time. Another way to do it, and a way that you should definitely do it, even if you test to begin with the browser, you should always check them out with the Chrome tools. So I'm going to open up my Chrome tools and hit this icon here. This is the device toolbar. And this actually allows you to test your web page on different devices. As you can see, the iPhone X, we have iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus, 6, 7, 8, even the 5, which you can see is much smaller, Pixel 2 XL, Pixel 2 Galaxy, and then we also have the iPad, so you can test for tablets. We have the iPad Pro, which is basically the same width as a laptop would be, but we can test with that as well. So I usually test mostly with the iPhone 6, 7, 8 and the iPhone X, but yeah, you're going to see some things here that you won't notice if you just use the browser because of the height. In the browser, you have a much bigger height than you do on actual smartphones, so you don't get a real look at what it looks like on a smartphone. But I'm going to close this for now by clicking the icon again. And we're going to go back in here. And inside my CSS, usually this would be in a separate file, but I can do it here as well. I'm going to add my first media query. So we do this by doing @media, some parentheses, and then inside here we can put a max width or a min width, or a max height or a min height. But I'm going to do max width, and I'm going to set it to 500 pixels. And then we open up some curly braces. Now, another thing I want to show you here in the device is it shows you the width and the height. Okay, so an iPhone X has a width of 375. Pixel is 411, Galaxy is 360. Notice that they're all under 500, so that's usually what I use for smartphones. So I'm going to go right here and say smartphones, and let's take the body and let's change the background to red. Okay, by default it's gray, or I should say the core style or the default styling is gray, but as you can see, when we test on an iPhone X or any of these devices, it's red. And I can close this up and just drag the browser, make it smaller. Once it hits 500, it turns red. Okay, and you can also do a min width. If I do min width, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to be red until I hit 500 pixels. Now, when you do mobile first design, usually you'll do all your base styling as you would on a mobile screen, and then add your min width for larger screens. Okay, but we'll get into that later. But I'm going to put this back to max. So the other thing that I want to do is only display the heading for that screen size. So by default, I'm going to set H1, all H1s, to have a display of none, okay, which will make them just disappear completely. So we'll save that. And then down in our media query for our smartphone, or for 500 pixels or less, I'm going to target the ID smartphone H1. And I'm going to set the display to its normal value of block. And there we go. So now it only displays when it's 500 pixels or less. Okay, now let's add another one for tablet. I'm going to just copy this whole thing here. And let's add tablet. And usually a tablet is around 768. That's a common breakpoint for tablets. I'm going to set this to blue. And let's grab the ID of tablet and display the H1. All right, now notice that even though we're under 500 pixels, this is still applying, because all we said was the max width of 768, and that includes 500 and less, so anything under 768. So if we wanted to target everything under 768, we could just do this. There's not even any need for this, but if we want a different style for smartphones and then something different for tablets, what we would do is a min width. Actually, I'm going to go right here, open up another set of curly braces, and say min width, and I'm going to do 501 pixels and a max width of 768. So if I save that, now when I get down to 500, notice it goes back to red. It just shows this styling because this media query is 501 to 768. Okay. Another thing I want to mention is that you might sometimes see this at media only screen and then the max or min width or whatever. Now the reason for this is because screen is one of the media types. There's screen, print, and I believe speech. And sometimes you'll see this, and it just means this only applies to screens. I usually leave this off because the default is all, so it'll show for, it doesn't matter the media type, but if you see this, it just means that it's only for screens. All right, so let's move on here. Let's do the normal size. So I'm going to copy this and paste that in. And let's change the values here. So this ends at 768, so let's do a min width of 769. And we'll go to, let's say, 1200. And I'm going to set the green, or the background, to green, and then I only want the normal ID H1 to show. So I'll save that, and now from 769 to 1200, we get that green normal. We hit 768 tablet, we hit 500 smartphone. All right, and then finally let's do the widescreen. So I'm just going to paste this in again, and we'll say widescreen. And for widescreen, I'm just going to do anything above 1200 or 1201, I should say. So we don't need a range. We can simply do min width 1201, and we can just get rid of this. And let's make it black. And the ID of widescreen. So now once I hit 1201, we get widescreen, and it's gonna stay like that as large as I go. Okay, so as you can see, we're just hitting breakpoints, and then those styles are kicking in. Now usually you're not going to have all of these. You're not going to have separate styles for every single device, but you might, for instance, have floats on your normal. You might have two sections that are floated left and right, or better yet, the flex. We use flex in the grid system later on. But then when you get to smaller screens, you want them to be on top of each other because it looks ridiculous floated like that on very small screens. So you would add a media query for a mobile device and just set the float to none. And that's exactly what we're going to do in our hotel website. But this is the syntax for media queries. So let's test this out in the device toolbar. So I'm going to open up my Chrome tools and hit the device toolbar. So any smartphone should just be red because they're all under 500 pixels wide. And then if I go to the iPad, we get the tablet. As you can see, it's 768. And then iPad Pro is going to be normal because it's 1024. Okay, and an iPad Pro is pretty wide. It's pretty much like a laptop. Okay, now for landscape, what we would do is probably set a height because actually, let me make this a little bigger, because if we hit this icon here, let's go back to iPhone, and we'll hit that, and it shows us landscape. And the width is 812, so it falls into normal. But let's add another one here. I'm going to just copy this. And let's see, we'll change this, landscape, and let's do a max height of 500 pixels. And we're going to change the background to orange. And let's say landscape H1, and we'll save that. And now notice that it's orange. We get landscape. It's also going to show normal because of the width. Okay, it's also whatever we have for the width still applies. We're just adding some for the height as well. All right, and if this is confusing, don't worry about it. Just like anything else that may have confused you, we're gonna touch on all of this stuff as we move along. So it's gonna make sense. It's gonna click. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is that we can actually have separate style sheets as our media query. If you don't want to embed the media query into a style sheet, you can have a separate one. So just for an example, I'm going to create a new file. I'm actually going to delete this after, but just to show you, we could do, like, let's say a style sheet called mobile.css and go up to the head, and just like we add any style sheet, we could use a link tag, rel style sheet, and we can point to mobile.css. Now right now it'll always load that style sheet, but we can actually add a media attribute, and in our media attribute we're going to say screen and then open some parentheses, and let's do a max width of 768 pixels. Now what this is going to do is it's only going to load this style sheet if the screen is 768 or less, so basically a tablet or less. Otherwise it's not going to load. Now you always want to have this after your main style sheet. In fact, this isn't even going to do what I want because our style, it's down here, so I'm going to move this below our style tags. So we'll go right here because you want your main styling up here, and then down here we have our mobile. So in our mobile CSS, oops, where is it? Right here. I'm going to actually take the body and I'm going to add a background of pink. So once I save that, once I hit 768, notice that it's pink. Okay. And it doesn't matter if it's tablet or smartphone because I set it to 768. And it's after the rest of our styling, so it's going to take precedence. Okay, but yeah, you can do that as well. I'm actually going to delete the that mobile CSS, and then I'm just going to comment out the link to it, just so you have it as a reference. All right, so that's media queries, and like I said, we're going to get more into them, but before we do that, I want to take a look at certain relative units in CSS, such as rem, m, as well as viewport heights and viewport widths. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.